There is a moment most men never name. Not when you're insulted, not when you're rejected, but when someone looks past you as if you're furniture. And in that moment, something inside you realizes a terrifying truth. This isn't accidental, this is earned. You don't lose respect loudly, you bleed it out quietly, conversation by conversation, favor by favor, silence by silence. Let me ask you something uncomfortable. Why do the same people who praise your kindness never listen to you? Why do they lean on you when they're broken, but disappear the moment you stand up straight? Why do your words land soft, while others say half as much and command the room? Here's the answer no one tells you in motivational speeches, because respect is not given to good men. It is given to men who refuse to be used. And Machiavelli understood this centuries ago, not as a philosopher, not as a moralist, but as a cold observer of power. He watched kings fall, allies betray, loyal men get crushed, while ruthless men survived. And he discovered something disturbing. People don't respect who you are. They respect what happens when they cross you. That's where this story begins. Mini story, The Invisible Man. There's a man I want you to picture. We'll call him Adrian. Adrian is competent, reliable, always available. He shows up early, stays late, listens carefully. Everyone says he's a good guy. And that's the problem. When meetings happen, Adrian speaks and gets interrupted mid-sentence. When credit is handed out, his work is described as team effort. When someone needs help moving, fixing, covering, explaining, they call Adrian. But when Adrian needs something, silence, excuses, delayed replies. At first, he tells himself it's maturity. Let it go. Be the bigger man. Don't make waves. But something starts to rot inside him, because deep down, Adrian knows the truth. They don't mistreat him because they hate him. They mistreat him because nothing happens when they do. And human nature notices patterns fast. Rising tension. The lie you were taught. From childhood, men like Adrian are taught a lie. Be agreeable and people will like you. Be patient and things will work out. Be understanding and you'll be rewarded. That lie works if you want to be liked. It fails completely if you want to be respected. Machiavelli warned about this exact trap. He wrote that men are ungrateful, fickle, liars, and deceivers when it benefits them, not because they are evil, but because they are human. And humans test boundaries the way water tests cracks, slowly, relentlessly. If nothing pushes back, they take more. That's not cruelty, that's gravity. So when you stay silent after being disrespected, when you forgive without consequence, when you explain yourself instead of enforcing limits, you are teaching people how to treat you. And they are learning fast. Micro cliffhanger. Here's the part that stings. The moment you finally explode, the moment you raise your voice, they look at you like you are the problem. Why? Because you trained them to believe you had no teeth. And now you're about to learn what Machiavelli believed was the most dangerous position a man can occupy. Shift, harmless versus powerful. Machiavelli never praised cruelty for its own sake. He praised effectiveness. To him, the worst thing you could be was not immoral. It was harmless. A harmless man is safe to ignore, safe to interrupt, safe to exploit. He creates comfort for others at the cost of his own authority. And the brutal truth is this: men do not respect what they can use without consequence. They might like it, they might praise it, but they do not respect it. Respect begins the moment your presence changes outcomes, foreshadowing the transformation. In the next part, I'm going to show you the exact psychological switch that flips when a man stops being harmless. Not louder words, not aggression, not threats. Something far colder, far more controlled. The same shift Machiavelli saw in rulers who went from disposable to untouchable. And once you see it, you will never tolerate being ignored again. Because respect doesn't start when others change. It starts the moment you do, the moment you stop explaining yourself. People panic, not because you became cruel, but because you became unpredictable. And unpredictability is the enemy of control. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most motivational videos avoid. You don't lose respect when you fail. You lose respect when people learn you will tolerate anything. Machiavelli understood this with surgical precision. He saw that power doesn't announce itself. It reveals itself through consequences. The switch. No one teaches you. Most men believe respect comes from being understood, so they talk more, they clarify, they justify, they defend. And every explanation shrinks them, because explanation signals uncertainty, defense signals weakness, and weakness invites testing. Think about it. Have you ever noticed how the most respected man in the room speaks the least? Not because he has nothing to say, but because when he does speak, something happens. Machiavelli wrote that men judge you less by your intentions and more by your outcomes, not what you meant, not what you hoped, but what followed. Mini story, the first line crossed. Let's return to Adrian. One afternoon, a colleague interrupts him again. Same tone, same dismissive wave of the hand. Old Adrian would have smiled politely, waited his turn, explained his point again. But something is different. Adrian stops mid-sentence. He looks directly at the man and says nothing. No anger, no sarcasm, just silence. The room shifts. The interrupter laughs nervously. Go on, he says. Adrian doesn't. He gathers his notes, closes his folder, and leaves the meeting. No explanation, no apology, just withdrawal. And for the first time, there is a cost, rising tension. Why silence works. That silence did more than any argument ever could, because it created a question. Did I cross a line? Did I lose access? Did something change? Machiavelli understood this instinctively. He believed fear of loss motivates more than hope of reward. When people believe they can lose your presence, your support, your approval, they recalibrate, not emotionally, strategically. And strategy is where respect lives. The dangerous myth of being nice. Modern culture praises men who are endlessly accommodating, but Machiavelli would call this a fatal misunderstanding of human nature. Kindness without boundaries is not virtue, it is permission. Every time you forgive without consequence, you announce that your boundaries are flexible. Every time you stay after being disrespected, you teach others that access to you is guaranteed. And guaranteed access has no value. Scarcity creates value, consistency creates trust, but boundaries create respect. Remove any one of them and your position collapses. Micro cliffhanger. Here's where most men sabotage themselves. They think boundaries require confrontation, that respect requires aggression, that power requires intimidation. Wrong. In the next part, you'll see why Machiavelli believed the most dangerous man in any room is not the loudest, but the one who can walk away without emotion. And once you master that, people will start behaving differently around you without you saying a word. The most shocking moment isn't when people disrespect you. It's when they stop, without you fighting back, without you raising your voice, without you proving anything. That's when you realize something chilling. Respect was never about who you were. It was about what you allowed. And the moment you stop allowing it, the entire dynamic rewires itself. The walkaway effect. Machiavelli believed there is one move that terrifies manipulators more than confrontation, more than anger, more than dominance displays. It is indifference with teeth, not emotional withdrawal, strategic withdrawal, because when you argue, you are still engaged. When you explain, you are still invested. When you plead to be understood, you are still asking for permission. But when you leave, calmly, silently, without justification, you remove something they assumed was permanent, your availability, and availability is power's currency. Mini-story, the shift becomes visible. After Adrian walks out of that meeting, something strange happens. No one confronts him, no one calls him out. But later that day, a message arrives. Hey, everything okay earlier? Not an apology, not yet. But notice the shift. They are checking in. Because uncertainty has entered the equation. The next meeting, Adrian is not interrupted. Not because he demanded respect, but because people are now unsure where the line is, and uncertainty forces caution. Machiavelli wrote that it is better to be respected than loved because love is fragile. But respect is calculated. Rising tension, why over-explaining kills authority. Most men destroy their own leverage by over-explaining. They say things like, I didn't mean it that way. I hope you understand. I just want to be fair. Each sentence is an emotional donation, and every donation reduces your leverage. Why? Because power never rushes to be understood. It assumes understanding will follow. Think about every figure you've ever respected. They didn't narrate their boundaries. They enforced them quietly, consistently, without debate. Machiavelli observed that when consequences are predictable, people adjust behavior automatically. No speech is required. The fear most men avoid facing. Here's the fear no one admits. If I stop giving, will they leave? Yes, some will. And Machiavelli would say, good, because anyone who only values you for what you provide was never aligned with you. They were attached to your utility. Utility creates dependency. Dependency creates exploit. Dependency creates exploitation. Respect only appears when access to you is conditional. Micro cliffhanger. But there's a trap here. Many men hear this message and swing to the opposite extreme. They become cold, detached, performative, and they still aren't respected. In the next part, you'll learn the distinction Machiavelli made between controlled distance and emotional shutdown. One builds authority, the other creates resentment, and confusing the two will cost you everything you just gained. Most men don't lose respect because they're weak. They lose it because they overcorrect. They mistake coldness for power and silence for strength. Machiavelli warned about this mistake long before psychology named it, because there is a fatal difference between being unavailable and being emotionally absent. One creates authority, the other creates suspicion. The line most men cross. Without realizing, after Adrian changes his behavior, he feels something new: relief, control, distance, and distance feels powerful. So he pulls back more, he stops engaging entirely, stops responding quickly, stops offering help, even when it costs him nothing. At first people hesitate around him, then they start whispering. What's his problem? He's changed. He thinks he's better than us now. This is the danger zone, because Machiavelli never taught emotional withdrawal. He taught measured presence. Power is not disappearance. Power is selectivity. Controlled distance versus emotional shutdown. Here's the distinction that separates respected men from resented ones. Controlled distance says, I choose when and how I engage. Emotional shutdown says, I'm hurt, so I'm gone. One is strategic, the other is reactive. Machiavelli believed reactions are visible, and visibility exposes weakness. When people sense your behavior is driven by emotion, they stop respecting it, even if they fear it. True authority feels calm, neutral, unrushed. It does not punish, it recalibrates. Mini story, the correction. Adrian notices the shift. So he adjusts, not backward but precisely. He engages again. But only when it matters. He helps, but not at personal cost. He speaks, but only once. And when interrupted, he doesn't argue. He simply finishes his sentence after the interrupter stops talking. No aggression, no apology, just presence. The room adapts, because now Adrian is not cold. He is solid. Rising tension. Why emotional men are predictable. Machiavelli wrote that men in power must avoid appearing driven by emotion, not because emotion is weak, but because it is predictable. Predictability creates leverage for others. If people know guilt controls you, they use guilt. If they know anger controls you, they provoke it. If they know kindness controls you, they exploit it. But when your responses are measured, when your behavior is consistent, when your boundaries are enforced without explanation, people stop trying, not out of fear, out of calculation. The real source of respect. Respect is born when people realize three things about you. You are not desperate for approval. You are willing to remove access. You do not explain your standards. That combination is rare, and rarity creates gravity. Men lean toward it. They adjust around it. They defer to it, not because you demand it, but because the cost of crossing you is real and quiet. Micro cliffhanger. But here's the final illusion you must break. Many men think respect is something you earn over time. Machiavelli believed the opposite. Respect is something you signal immediately. And in the next part, I'll show you the exact signals. Subtle, invisible, and devastatingly effective, that tell people how to treat you before you ever speak. Miss these signals, and no amount of confidence will save you. Before anyone hears your words, they read your standards. And once those standards are read, they rarely get reinterpreted. Machiavelli understood something ruthless about first impressions. They don't introduce you. They define the limits of how you'll be treated. And most men signal weakness long before disrespect ever shows up. The silent signals you're broadcasting. You think respect is lost during conflict. Wrong, it's lost in the pauses, the hesitations, the micro adjustments you make to stay comfortable. Do you wait too long to speak? Do you laugh off disrespect to keep the mood light? Do you soften your tone when stating something important? Those aren't manners. They are signals, and humans are experts at decoding them. Machiavelli wrote that people form judgments not from truth, but from what appears consistent. If your behavior suggests you avoid tension, they'll create it because they know you'll retreat. Mini story, the first 10 seconds. Adrian notices something subtle. When he enters a room, the tone is set within 10 seconds, not by what he says, but by how he moves. Before, he rushed, smiled quickly, adjusted his posture to fit in. Now he slows down. He doesn't scan for approval. He doesn't rush to fill silence. He stands where he chooses. And something changes. People look up when he speaks, not because he's louder, but because he's grounded. Machiavelli would say, power announces itself through composure. Rising tension. Why stillness intimidates. Stillness unsettles people. A man who doesn't rush forces others to adjust their pace. A man who doesn't overreact removes emotional leverage. A man who doesn't explain forces interpretation. And interpretation creates caution. This is why nervous men talk too much. They're trying to manage perception. Powerful men don't manage perception. They let others do the work. The approval trap. Here's where most men fail again. They sense respect increasing, and they sabotage it by seeking confirmation. They ask, "Is that okay? Do you agree? Does that make sense?" Each question hands control back. Machiavelli believed that once authority is questioned, even gently, it weakens, because authority does not ask to be validated, it acts, and action sets the frame. Micro cliffhanger. Now listen carefully. Everything so far has been about preventing disrespect. But there's a moment every man faces where prevention is no longer enough. A line is crossed, publicly, deliberately, and what you do in the next 5 seconds will define how you're treated for years. In the next part, I'll show you Machiavelli's most misunderstood principle: how to respond to open disrespect without losing control, status, or dignity. Get this wrong, and you become reactive again. Get it right, and people never try you twice. Disrespect becomes permanent the moment you respond emotionally. That's the paradox. The louder you defend yourself, the smaller you become. And Machiavelli warned men about this exact moment, the moment of public challenge. Because how you respond here doesn't just affect this situation, it rewrites your reputation. The 5-second rule of power. When a man disrespects you openly, your nervous system wants to react. Raise your voice. Correct them immediately. Explain why they're wrong. That impulse is natural and fatal. Machiavelli believed that the first man to lose emotional control has already lost the exchange. Why? Because public disrespect is never about truth. It's about testing status. And tests are not answered with explanations. They are answered with consequences. Mini story, the public test. Adrian faces it one afternoon. A colleague smirks during a discussion and says, loudly enough for others to hear, "That's not really your decision, is it?" The room freezes. This is the moment. Old Adrian would have rushed to clarify, listed his role, defended his authority. New Adrian pauses 3 seconds. He looks at the man, not with anger, but with curiosity. Then he says calmly, "We'll talk after." And he continues the meeting. No debate, no justification, just postponement. And postponement signals power, rising tension. Why delay dominates. That single sentence does something profound. It denies the audience a spectacle. It removes emotional fuel. It reframes the interaction as private. Machiavelli believed humiliation should be avoided in public, but consequences should be absolute in private. Why? Because public fights create enemies. Private consequences create discipline. The colleague spends the rest of the meeting uneasy, not because he was attacked, but because he wasn't resolved. Unresolved tension is terrifying. The private consequence. After the meeting, Adrian closes the door. No raised voice, no lecture, just facts. "You questioned my authority publicly. That won't happen again." Short, direct, final, then silence. The man nods. Not because he agrees, but because the hierarchy has been clarified. Machiavelli wrote that punishment must be swift, certain, and unemotional. Emotion creates drama. Certainty creates obedience. The mistake that ruins and most men do the opposite. They explode publicly, then apologize privately. That inversion destroys respect. It teaches people that your anger is temporary and your boundaries are negotiable. Machiavelli would say, never allow your correction to be emotional, and never allow your authority to be debated. Debate suggests equality. Authority assumes difference. Micro cliffhanger. But here's the final layer most men never master. Handling disrespect isn't enough, because once respect rises, something else appears. Expectation. People expect more from you. They lean on you. They test you again, subtly. In the next part, you'll learn how Machiavelli ensured that rising respect never turned into dependency, because being respected but overburdened is just another form of being used. The moment people start respecting you, they try something new. They stop pushing and start leaning. This is the phase that breaks strong men, because respect, unmanaged, turns into expectation, and expectation quietly becomes obligation. Machiavelli warned that power is not lost only through attack. It is lost through overextension, when respect turns into a trap. As Adrian's authority solidifies, the tone around him changes. People come to him for decisions, for clarity, for backup. At first, it feels good. Finally, acknowledgement. Finally, recognition. But soon, something feels familiar again. His time disappears. His energy drains. The weight returns, just disguised as importance. Machiavelli would recognize this immediately. He wrote that men in power must avoid becoming indispensable, because the moment you are indispensable, you are no longer free. Mini story. The new pressure. Adrian notices a pattern. Small requests stack up. Just one quick thing. Can you handle this? You're the only one who can. It sounds like respect, but it smells like dependency. And dependency is exploitation wearing a better suit. So Adrian does something counterintuitive. He says no, not angrily, not defensively, just calmly. I can't take that on. No excuse, no justification. The silence that follows is loud. Rising tension. Why saying no raises? Status. Machiavelli believed limits create hierarchy. When you say yes to everything, you position yourself beneath everyone. When you say no selectively, you signal that your time has value. Value creates leverage. Leverage creates respect. Notice this carefully. Adrian doesn't reject people. He rejects demands. He remains present but unavailable. And that balance changes everything. The hidden fear behind overgiving. Most men overgive because they fear regression. If I stop helping, will they stop respecting me? Machiavelli's answer would be brutal and honest. If respect only exists while you overextend yourself, it was never respect, it was rent, paid through exhaustion. True respect survives your absence. It doesn't collapse when you step back. Micro cliffhanger. Now here's the final twist. There is one last illusion men cling to, even after mastering boundaries, silence, and control. They believe respect is something others grant. Machiavelli believed the opposite. Respect is something you assume. And in the final part, I'll show you the mindset shift that locks everything in. The internal posture that makes disrespect feel impossible before it even occurs. Miss this final piece and everything you built will erode again. The final shift is not something you do. It's something you stop asking for. And once you make it, disrespect doesn't end dramatically. It simply stops appearing. Because the most dangerous man in any room is not the one demanding respect. It's the one who already assumes it. The last illusion to break. Most men, even disciplined ones, carry a hidden question inside them. Do they respect me? Machiavelli would call that question fatal, because the moment you ask it, you've already placed yourself below judgment. Power does not wait to be evaluated. It operates from assumption, not arrogance, certainty. Respect is not a reward you earn at the end of good behavior. It is the baseline you enforce through posture, decision, and restraint. And once you internalize that, your behavior changes without effort. The internal posture that changes everything. Here is the internal shift Machiavelli understood intuitively. You stop seeing yourself as someone who must be treated well, and start seeing yourself as someone whose presence is optional, but valuable. Optional, but valuable. That means you don't chase responses. You don't over-clarify intentions. You don't rush to repair every misunderstanding. You let gaps exist, and gaps force others to decide how they'll approach you. Men who respect themselves don't micromanage perception. They let reality speak. Mini story. The final test months later, Adrian faces a familiar situation. A new colleague pushes slightly, a subtle dismissal, a half-joke meant to test limits. Adrian doesn't react, doesn't correct, doesn't even acknowledge it. He continues exactly as if it never happened. Later, the colleague adjusts his tone, then his posture, then his behavior. Not because Adrian asserted dominance, but because Adrian never accepted the frame. Machiavelli believed power is most effective when it doesn't need to announce itself. Why this works: at the deepest level, humans are constantly scanning for hierarchy, not consciously, instinctively. They ask questions like, does this man need approval? Does he fear loss? Does he tolerate disrespect? When the answers are no, no, and no, the game ends before it starts. Disrespect thrives on permission, and permission is always internal first. The final warning: this is not about becoming cold or distant or superior. Machiavelli never admired emptiness. He admired clarity, clear standards, clear consequences, clear self-concept. If you confuse respect with intimidation, you'll create enemies. If you confuse respect with kindness, you'll invite exploitation. But when respect is rooted in self-assumption, it becomes effortless. The closing truth. Here is the truth Machiavelli would leave you with. The world does not treat you how you want to be treated. It treats you how you accept being treated. The day you stop negotiating your worth, stop explaining your boundaries, stop performing goodness for approval, you are no longer ignored. You are no longer tested. You are no longer consumed. You are respected, not because you demanded it, but because nothing else was possible.